This morning, let's explore the fan favorite boinking your way to nirvana. And or to be more uptight and formal about it, the Dzogchen view of tantric sex. Now, I gotta be honest with you. When, so this goes back to, so I want to give you a bit of the old overview. I've always had disabilities. I've always had neurodivergence. I was born with fetal alcohol syndrome and birth trauma brain damage and dysautonomia and ADHD and autism and what's it called? Autoimmune disorders. So, super sickly child. And I was pretty much born in 1965, and with the exception of Star Trek: The Original Series, I was pretty much living in a sci-fi desert. And then 1977 came along, and I got to see Star Wars on the big screen, probably one of the biggest screens in Los Angeles County. And it blew my little furry Hebrew mind. I was 12, so I was preparing for my bar mitzvah at this time. And Obi-Wan Kenobi blew my mind because that was my first exposure to the archetype of Holy Man as hero. I was familiar with Holy Man as coward, or Holy Man as villain, or Holy Man as ideologue, but never Holy Man as hero. And so that really, really hit me hard. And I knew I wanted to be, a Jedi Knight. But I had to be true to myself, and not only could I relate to Obi-Wan Kenobi, I could also relate to Star Trek and Captain Kirk's profound libido. So it didn't take long for me to be drawn like an iron filing to a magnet to the tantric traditions of Buddhism. I've said all that to say this. We're going to explore the tantric view, the Dzogchen view of tantric sex. Now, along the way, I want to assure you that I have made virtually every conceivable error. And I would like it very much if you could learn from my mistakes so you wouldn't have to go through the obstacles and detours that I did. So when it comes to when it comes to tantric sex, once again, there are two extremes and a happy middle. So the first extreme I call the Hindu paradigm, and not 100% of Hindu, because Hindu is a umbrella term for many, 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 many sects. But the stereotype, for Hindu Tantra as taught in America is that you're chasing a intense simultaneous orgasm between two partners, and the idea is that you can orgasm your way to enlightenment. And of course, the question is, what is their definition of enlightenment? Their definition of enlightenment is a particular state you have to ascend to, like the top of a thermometer in a turkey. The problem with that is that it's constructing we can return to one of my common themes, the dangers of a gilded cage. You might have the world's most beautiful, comfortable cage, but it's still a cage. And if our enlightenment depends on a specific physiological state, a specific psycho-spiritual state, then whenever we're out of that state, we're not enlightenment. And so we've essentially painted ourselves into a corner, and that's not what I would describe as liberation. The other extreme is the neo-Taoist paradigm. So most people agree that the founder of philosophical Taoism was Lao Tzu, according to some, the author of the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. That's awesome. Approximately several centuries later, along came someone who became known as Ancestor Wu, and he's the one who gave us alchemy and all this stuff, who renamed the three treasures of the Tao, said, no, three treasures of the Tao are not simplicity, patience, and compassion. They are Jing, Chen, and Shen, or body, breath, and mind. So when most of us think of neo-Taoism, we think of Kung Fu theater. We think of people doing slow motion martial arts in the park. We people think of people playing with their hands when they meditate, or holding bizarre postures when they meditate. Um, that's the neo-Taoist paradigm. And from that paradigm, the majority of the practitioners' view of tantric sex is don't climax. And both the Hindu paradigm of chasing climax and the neo-Taoist paradigm of fleeing um, climax sadly reinforce the fundamental duality of samsara, which is dread and desire, or in this case, desire and dread. And it really feeds neurosis. In any organization, the majority of the practitioners tend to be more patriarchal, metaphorically speaking, and the minority tends to be matriarchal, once again, metaphorically speaking. So it shouldn't surprise you that my first Buddhist tantric teachers were patriarchal. And so my first forays into tantric sex were patriarchal, where rigidity and fear and controlling tendencies rule the day. So my first introduction, so I first began with the two extremes of the Hindu paradigm and the Neo-Taoist paradigm, and so I experimented with great enthusiasm. Now, also at that time, because my teachers were from my first teachers, I shouldn't say first. One of my first teachers was from the Yellow Hat sect. My emphasis at that point in my life was on contemplation, really over exercising my prefrontal cortex. And so way back in the early 2000s, when I would engage in tantric sex, I would be simultaneously composing and editing contemplations in my head. And my tantric partner at the time would be annoyed and say, "Are you counting syllables again while we're doinking?" And I was not subtle. I'd be, as we're making love, I'd rest a hand on her body and, count syllables so I could balance the in and out breaths. So that was my top priority. I was not going to be confused with the Sultan of Suave. Coolness left the building. I was not remotely related to James Bond. So that was fun to experiment, and it gave me a lot of raw data. That's funny. Receiving raw data in the raw. That's what was going on. Um, Fortunately, at that time, I had, by the early 2000s, I'd left behind the Yellow Hat sect, and had left behind the Red Hat sect as well, and was in the Rime sect, the non-denominational set of Tantric Buddhism, Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, whose poster boy was Dzogchen Trul Rinpoche, especially his final text, The Heart Treasure of the Enlightened Ones. And so that began introducing me to get me away from visualizations and the manipulations of channels, winds, and drops, and into just mindfulness and meditation. It was tough because I really had to do a lot of deprogramming. Fortunately, living masters gave me pointed out instructions. I received pointed out instructions from Lama, Chodrak, Gyatso, and Bakutuku, and those really helped. I still had like a cat whose head was stuck in a bag of Doritos and is trying to back out in vain. I had a lot of difficulty extricating myself from the pernicious and the persistent worldview taught me by both the Yellow Hat sect and the Red Hat sect of being just lost in visualization and work with the channel was a drop, and the idea of working exclusively with mindfulness and meditation was still foreign. That realization did not reach its zenith, its climax metaphorically speaking, until I was exposed to the source text of Dzogchen, composed by the founder of Dzogchen, whose name in Sanskrit is Prahevajra, which translates into Tibetan as Garab Dorje. So let's tie this up. Let's come close to tying this up in a big red bow. Having found the middle path and brought the middle path into the bedroom, the key is this. If we are not comfortable with the practices of mindfulness and meditation with our clothes on, we probably will not have the wherewithal to practice it while we are giving our favorite sexual favor, or receiving our favorite sexual favor, or enjoying or sharing our favorite sexual activity. So one of the cool things is when we practice together as a team with all our clothes on, we get really better and better at the nuances of mindfulness and meditation. And so if you practice for at least 5 minutes every 12 hours or so, within a week or two, you're going to be ready to bring this into the bedroom, which is, once again, great fun. Now, when I first proposed the idea of tantric sex to my first post-marriage partner, once again in the early 2000s, she was skeptical because she was concerned, due to experiences with a previous partner, that would be like running through an erotic checklist. And I explained to her that the key is centered spontaneity. If we are flowing from the centered spontaneity generated by mindfulness and meditation, then there is no checklist. It's a fun, mutually nurturing, mutually respective dance of erotic centered spontaneity. The goal is not to avoid orgasm. The goal is not to chase orgasm. The goal is to perform a centered, spontaneous dance of mutual delight. Gently, at whatever pace you're comfortable with. Some people like slow motion sex. Some people like aerobic porno sex. Whatever style speaks to you, each of you, in the moment. As you breathe in, notice. As you breathe out, relax. And oh yeah, gentlemen, by the way, applying mindfulness meditation to the sexual act will increase your endurance. The goal of sexual congress no longer is thunderous orgasm for either party, nor is it the repression of thunderous orgasm. It's just enjoying the moment. Everything is pleasure in tantric sex, whether that pleasure is coarse, very, very coarse, or very, very subtle. The goal is just peace and the bliss of intimacy. That's it. Whatever happens is just a bonus. And so that takes the burden of an agenda away. Everything you do is done spontaneously. Now, way back when, I remember when this is still a new idea to me, I remember saying to, and I'm going to edit this, obviously. I was saying to my partner at the time, when you do I love it when you do thus and such. It really feels like love. And she's all, I don't do thus and such to you because I love you. I do thus and such to you because I really enjoy doing thus and such. And that was a mind blower. So when we have sort of a mutual, gentle, hedonistic dance of awareness and release, that is the Buddhist agenda for meditation, so for tantric sex. But alas, right now we are without a partner and our clothes are on, and we're going to continue with the remainder of this morning's live stream with G-rated activities. So before we move on to the official meditation section, let's take about 40 seconds for housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to, let's try this again, of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. I've spent more than 30 years working full time at the task of studying and practicing and then reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Taoism and Buddhism, so you won't have to. I've learned to play the Yoda to your Luke Skywalker so that you could quickly and easily become the person that your dog already thinks you are. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So, according to the three teachers who most dramatically shaped my spiritual path, Yong-jia Xuan-jue, Za Paltrul Rinpoche, Garab Dorje, prayer is not necessary, ritual is not necessary. But in my decades of teaching, I found that people like structure. Like a sprinter, just as a sprinter has a visceral response to the sound of a starter pistol and the sight of the finish line, most people like to begin and end their meditation with a short, concise recitation. So I've incorporated that. These recitations are not meant to be a prayer to a real or imagined celestial entity, for doing so tends to make children of adults, and we don't need any help being petulant. What we're doing is we're using verbal recitation to exercise the neural pathways responsible for love and enthusiasm. Our first recitation is more literal in its verbiage, and it's set to the triplet chant together. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on thee. Buddha's example, instructions, and students. So those three highlighted words are so many people have found them to be so helpful that they've earned the metaphoric nickname of the three wish-fulfilling jewels, which are inferred in our final premeditation recitation, which is concise and figurative and employs the bookend chant together. May I liberate all beings by relying on the three jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the three jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the three jewels. Let's take a moment to review the basic meditation instructions. Mindfulness and meditation are known by many names, such as Zen, Proto-Zen, Shan Dhyana, Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, Ati-yoga, Dzogchen, and Trekcho. Despite the fanciness of these words, the technique is simple. Let's begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access our sympathetic nervous system within the ribcage region of our spinal cord. It has not evolved to support our practice of active concentration, which is a good thing. Instead, it has evolved to support our practice of simple perception, which is vulnerable and passive and visceral and random. Mindfulness could best be typified by inhalation's 12-syllable recitation, perceiving this very turbulent play of mind. Yes, many people who are rigid and fearful and controlling will tell you that the playfulness of mind is a bad thing, but it's not. It's integral to the Buddha's path. So what are 10 different ways the mind is playful? The mind, through its sense organs, sees, hears, physically feels, tastes, and smells, and the like. The mind internally emotes and intends and reasons and remembers and imagines. So the next logical question is, how do we keep from drowning in all these random perceptions? We practice meditation, but how does that work? Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the pelvis region of the spinal cord and the tippy top of the neck region of the spinal cord, which is best typified by exhalation's 12-syllable recitation, relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature. So let's focus on non-graspability. The literal-minded people tend to get lost in rigid belief or pseudo-intellectual skullduggery, trying to prove it to themselves and others. Fortunately, most of us have graduated to the 4th grade, where we were taught of figures of speech. We're taught that some statements are literal, some are similes, some statements are metaphors, some statements are hyperbolic. So here's how it works. Every time we relax into our every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever we perceived during our previous inhalation could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast empty void. It could feel as if it was as non-graspable as the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn. Grasp it though you might, you'll never pull back a hand full of blue. And this is the root of the most popular Buddhist metaphors that only get confusing when we approach them literally. Metaphors like birthlessness, deathlessness, selflessness. These are just metaphors for our subjective experience of the physiological processes of inhalation and exhalation. It's just that simple. So together, as a team, let us meditate as transformatively as Obi-Wan Kenobi upon the toasty sands of Tatooine under the guidance of the Force ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn. Let's begin with the 12-syllable exercise, or I like to call the 2 training wheels. Let us remove the first training wheel and transition from the 12-syllable exercise down to the 3-syllable exercise. Silently and mentally reciting "notice this" during each inhalation, and silently and mentally reciting "relaxing" during each exhalation. You could be as myopic as Lois Lane, who cannot see that Clark Kent is Superman, and still observe that on this page there are 10 electives. And here's how this works. Our job is not to mind blank. Our job is not to tolerate perceptual experience. Our job is to harness perceptual experience and make the most of it. Sometimes we'll have a strong visual experience, sometimes a strong auditory experience, sometimes a strong kinesthetic experience. You might feel aches and pains and whatnot. Sometimes we'll have a strong gustatory experience. Sometimes we'll have a strong olfactory experience. Sometimes we'll have a strong emotional experience or a strong experience of will. Sometimes we'll really have a strong experience of thinking. Sometimes we'll have a strong memory. Sometimes we'll have a strong fantasy. When that happens, we don't shove it away. We don't indulge it. We harness it and treat that experience as a power pack, as rocket fuel to support our journey to the stars, metaphorically speaking. When you do that, when whatever comes up becomes a tool to serve your meditation, you are all of a sudden find that there are no distractions. Distraction belongs to the duality of concentration and distraction. But when you are mindful of whatever comes up, external or internal, physical or mental, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring, glorious or grotesque, we are free from that duality. And there's a subtle duality. The British have a saying, perhaps you've heard it, don't put too fine a point on it. What does that mean? When we get too detailed and say, oh, that's beautiful and that's ugly, well, that's duality. When we say, oh, that's a visual perception, that is a sight, we sort of sidestep the duality of falling into the analysis of that's a pretty sight or an ugly sight. No, it's just a sight. There is no happiness or sadness. There's emotion. There's no malice or empathy. There's intention. There is no dullness or sharpness. There's just thought. There's no happy memory or sad memory. There's just memory. There's no nightmare or dream. There's just that which we imagine. And so this is the effortless way of weaning ourselves out of the duality that tends to feed our neurosis like a cop in a donut shop. So feel free to play with these labels, but remember, perfectionism is not the goal. Perfectionism is not the means. Give yourself permission to be human, to be sloppy, to notice our sensation or our recollection after it just happened. That's fine. There are controlling killjoys who will say the number of microseconds between experiencing something and noticing it and then labeling it is an indictment. It should be immediate. Those guys are joyless wonders. Let's not listen to them. It takes you however long it takes you. Enjoy it. Sometimes we're quick. Sometimes we're slow. Sometimes we're precise. Sometimes we're sloppy. It don't matter. Have fun, because there is no finish line. The path is the goal. Enjoy the path. Have fun with the path. And your life is going to be amazing. Treat the path as an ordeal to be endured, and you're going to be a grim-faced, miserable guy. So listen, we'll be like the fish and the cat of and the cat of the cat in the hat. Neurotic and always hysterical, and no one wants that. So let's have fun, not beat ourselves up. And now we can play with the exact same exercises, but we will take off our final training wheel and graduate to the one-syllable version of each exercise. Now there's certain adaptations. Instead of physical sensation, we have form. Instead of emotional sensation, we have feel. Instead of recollection, we have then. And instead of imagination, we have dream. When you begin experiencing a light show behind your eyelids, there will be CEs. Saying a light show is neither good nor bad, it simply is. It's no different than hearing something or feeling something or tasting something. It could be great fun if together as a team we chanted a verse from the Song of Enlightenment together. I traveled great rivers, court mountains, and streams, seeking teachers and masters to better understand meditation. Ever since taking the Cow River Road, I have discovered life and death have no hold on me. The author of this text explains that after great effort, he received the teachings and so mastered them that he was freed from the tyranny of dread and desire, the mark of enlightenment attained. Let's chant. Walking is meditation, sitting is meditation, speaking or silent, moving or still I am at peace. Even at knife point I remain unmoved, even poisons cannot affect me. Before my teacher, the Buddha, met Dipankara. He spent kalpas as Kshanti the ascetic. The author has sliced through the tyranny of hope and fear through mastering the instructions of the Buddha. Thus illustrating that a teacher of flesh, blood, and bone is not always required. How many births, how many deaths? Birth and death go on without end. Since I suddenly realized that nothing is born, I treat fame and shame the same. As we relax into our exhalation, all that seemed quite permanent during our inhalation can now feel as fleeting and non-graspable as a season, a full moon, a sunset, a breath, or even that which has come into existence, or even that which has yet to come into existence. As we relax into our exhalation, both the shame and fame which had conventionally seemed to be so very different during meditation could feel as non-graspable as a vast empty void, rendering them of the same taste in their ultimate aspect. The key to enlightenment is being vulnerable to duality as we breathe in, to relax into their single non-graspable nature as we breathe out. together. I moved to a mountain and found a quiet place, deep and secluded beneath tall pines. An outsider monk, I still enjoy sitting. Take two. An outsider monk, I enjoy sitting still. Settled at last, I am truly at peace. The wise find practice far more fulfilling than mere accolades. Let us seal this practice with a bit of the old chanting, beginning with kind ethics and concluding with the four immeasurables. May all beings practice have kind communication, conduct, and calmness for spontaneous and uncontrived. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy. May no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 hours or so, I would very much like to return to lead this evening's meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.